Alrighty, everyone, let's take a look at our two-game NHL slate on Draftkings. But first, huge shout out and thank you to Steven and Randy who let me know that the mic levels were too low and it was hard to hear on my other video, so I tried to adjust the mic input volume. Hopefully, it's easier for you all to hear and it sounds better now for you. On to hockey for today. We have Florida and Boston, Vancouver and Edmonton. Looking at the goalies first, I'm actually guessing that Ullmark starts for Boston tonight. So I've put him in as the projected goalie. If they do stick with Swayman, I'll adjust that. And that'll drop Florida's targetability rating down a little bit. And for Vancouver, I'm putting in Shilovs again. But if Demko's ready, I could see Demko starting. I could even see Casey DeSmith getting another start. So those two are in yellow because I think they have a real likelihood of being a different than normal starter for Boston and Vancouver. We'll have to keep an eye on those. Bobrovsky and Skinner are not confirmed, but I think it's very likely that the two normal goalies for Florida and Edmonton get the starts again tonight. One thing to note, though, even with the two questionable goalies, Ullmark and Shilovs, it doesn't really matter who starts. It's not going to change how I target tonight's slate as far as stacking teams. So looking at our targetability ratings, we have the highest targetability belonging to Edmonton, which I'm sure is not a surprise, at 24.69. It's actually one of the highest targetabilities we've seen in the last week and a half or so of the playoffs, followed by Florida at 22.6. Again, this is with Ullmark projected to start for Boston. Then we have Vancouver at 19.1 and Boston at 17.3. Switching over to the Today's Targets tab. My listed 4 stacks: Edmonton 1, Florida 2, then Vancouver 2, and then I actually went to Florida 3, who have been playing pretty well. They're in I think, a pretty decent spot. Again, as I mentioned before last game in the Florida-Boston series, Florida's just a far superior team, and without their goalie playing astronomically well, Boston just doesn't really stand much of a chance. Florida's better all around. And so I think Florida's in a good spot to continue to handle Boston in these games. Not saying they're going to put up 6 goals again, but it's certainly in the realm of possibility. And Florida 3 has been playing quite well. In fact, if we go to Daily Faceoff, pull up the Panthers lines, if I can figure out the alphabet, there it is. F comes after E. And look at the last 5 for Florida. So it's Luosterainen, Lundell, and Rodriguez. You can see Luosterainen has 4 points, Lundell has 3 points, Rodriguez has 4 points, and their last 5. That's awesome for a third-line production. And then you also have Rodriguez has put 13 shots on goal. Luosterainen's put 9 shots on goal. So you're not getting a lot of shots, but they're making the most of it, putting up a lot of points. And at a cheap salary, you can use that Florida 3 line to kind of get to the Edmonton Stars, which I think is going to be the main priority for today's slate. Getting those Edmonton big guns in if you can. So in my strategy section, I kind of want to go over my thoughts on how to play the slate based on how the series have been going, and then what the stats tell me about where the good matchups are, who's likely to win, things like that. And I think the most abnormal thing, especially for these two series, is that you play literally whatever goalie fits your team. And it does not matter if you're stacking against that goalie, which is a weird concept, but that's just kind of the way these series have been. Only one team out of these 4 has been consistently putting shots on net, and that's the Florida Panthers. The problem with that is the Boston goalies are the most expensive on the slate and the least likely to get the win. So paying over $8K for one of these Boston goalies when they're clearly the worst team is not going to feel great. And then the other 3 teams, Florida, Edmonton, and Vancouver, their goalies have scored in single digits, even in wins, in this series already. I think one of the Edmonton-Vancouver games, the losing goalie actually scored a point more or something. So there's just no shots, no saves to be had. Play whatever goalie fits. I do not care if you stack against them. Just fill out your stacks, and then whatever goalie you can play, plug them in and move on. As I mentioned before, with Boston, I think Swayman is experiencing some regression to the mean. He was way too good in the first series against Toronto and in game one against Florida, and he's starting to come back to earth a little bit, which just kills Boston's chances. As I mentioned earlier, Florida's a far superior team. I have no interest in stacking Boston. Marchand might be out too, which hurts. They have very little skill at the forward position without Marchand. The only Boston skaters I'm interested in are Carlo or Peak, purely from a shot blocking value standpoint. And other than that, I'm not going to be touching the Bruins tonight. The top strategy for me is to get as many Edmonton skaters as possible. We'll have to check line one as it gets closer to game time. I'm assuming it's going to be Draisaitl, McDavid, and Hyman, which means their three best fantasy producers are all going to be playing on the top line and on the top power play. So perfect correlation for them. If you can get all three of them, I think you do it, and I think that's the priority. Get those three in, plug in with cheap skaters, whatever goalie fits, use Carlo, use Peak, make it work. And I mentioned there are some one-offs you can target and some cheap lines here. Elias Lindholm for Vancouver. He's skating on the third line, but he's playing on the top power play, and he's been playing well recently. Let's just go pull up Lindholm's stats here for the last 5 games. 4 points, 13 shots, 8 blocks in the last 5 games. And I think he's like a little over 4K on DraftKings. He's a nice one-off that you can use to save salary to get those Edmonton guys in. Same for Sam Bennett, who just came back last game, skating on line 2 on the road, playing on power play 2. He didn't put any shots on goal, but he did have an assist last game. So hopefully as he gets back into the swing of things, he'll produce a little bit more, but he's also cheap, a nice one-off. And then I mentioned that you can save money going to Florida line 3, who we talked about already, or Vancouver line 3. That's the Lindholm line. So Joshua hasn't done a whole lot of shooting or blocking, but he does have 4 points in the last 5 games, same as Lindholm. But Lindholm and Garland are also putting more shots on net. They're cheap. I think Lindholm's on power play 1, but Joshua and Garland are power play 2. So you can go with all 3 of those guys, or even just Joshua and Garland. Some combination of Vancouver 3 makes sense as a way to save money, to again fit in as many Edmonton guys as possible. And I think that is the last part of the strategy and probably the most important one, in my opinion. Edmonton clearly in the best spot, the most likely to go off, the most likely to have guys record the 3-point bonus. So I don't think it's possible to play too many Edmonton skaters. 4 or 5 Edmonton skaters in your lineup is completely viable, might even be considered preferable, and then build out from there. So to recap the main thoughts for tonight, Edmonton in the best spot, Florida in the second best spot. Keep an eye on if Ullmark or Swayman starts, although I don't think it changes Florida's targetability too much. I still like them behind Edmonton. We might get a change in Vancouver net, but again, if anything, it's just going to make Edmonton more viable, getting a rusty goalie. So Edmonton and Florida, my top 2 options for tonight. Play literally any goalie. It does not matter. Build your stacks, plug in whatever goalie's left. Don't even worry about if you're stacking against that goalie. Just play them. Carlo and Peak is where you can go to find some cheap shot blocking defensemen to save some money. You can also use guys like Lindholm and Bennett to save some money to get those Edmonton stars in. And you can look to Florida 3 and Vancouver 3 as a way to save money if you want a secondary stack that's pretty cheap. Okay, I think that covers it for kind of what the stats, what the data, what the spreadsheet's telling me for tonight's 2-game slate. If there's anything else you will want to see, let me know and I'll try to add it to the model. Otherwise, good luck tonight.